Ouch! Help me!
I could only moan softly, protecting my aching back and legs. The moment I returned to my apartment and entered the parking lot, the car that had been stopped in front of me suddenly sped towards me. There was no time to avoid it. The car hit me, and a dull thud echoed through the parking lot. I fell hard on the asphalt, hitting my back and buttocks, enduring the pain until I could no longer bear the pain in my thigh. It seemed I had cut my thigh on the asphalt when I fell, as blood steadily seeped out. As the shocking sight threatened to make me lose consciousness, I heard the sound of the car door opening. It was my husband, Charles, coming from the passenger side. Charles. Even as I called out to Charles with a trembling voice, our eyes did not meet. Charles, who had approached the front of the car, only had eyes for the front bumper that had hit me. Despite my calls, Charles meticulously inspected the car without responding. Finally, he stood up, approached the driver's seat with a gentle smile, and spoke.
The car's not damaged. Are you okay, Mom? That must have been scary.
It seemed he was more concerned about his mom, Deborah, who was pale in the driver's seat, than about me, bleeding in front of him. A surge of anger rose from the pit of my stomach, and then, my name is Melissa. I'm a 25-year-old office worker. I moved from a remote island in Hawaii to a university in Washington State and got a job at a company near the university. I started dating Charles, a salesman who visited our company, and we got married just 1 month ago. Even if you continues to work, what should we do about where to live? I've been thinking maybe we could start building a house from now.
It's not necessary to decide now. Let's rent an apartment first, then look for land and discuss what kind of house to build. But I do want to live in a house someday, so let's start saving for it.
We were happy just talking about the future. Charles was an only child. His family consisted of just Deborah. A few years ago, his father, Daniel, passed away, leaving him and his mother living together. As we were about to get married, we were looking at various apartments. But then, Deborah suggested we live with her. I was hesitant about living with her right after getting married, but he immediately conveyed to her that we would not be living together. Instead, he said he was scared to leave her alone and wanted to rent a house near the in-laws' house. Thinking it was better than living together, I agreed. We rented an apartment within walking distance of the in-laws' house. Melissa, thank you so much. I'm glad to have you two nearby. After Daniel passed away, it was just Charles and me living together. I would have been scared if he left, too. Thank you, really.
Thank you as well. I'm glad you're nearby. And this dinner is delicious. Thank you.
Don't mention it, dear. Food tastes better when there's more of it, so don't worry about it. Since we were within walking distance, Deborah frequently checked in on us. Knowing that we were a dual-income couple with overlapping busy periods, she would bring over homemade meals once a week. Honestly, with both of us coming home late during busy periods, it was a relief to have her dinners. She was kind and a good person, and I was happy to have found such a wonderful partner. My mom has been talking about Charles and Deborah since the family meeting. They are nice people. She was very happy to see them. Charles and I have been getting along well since our marriage. On weekends, we often go for drives. He loves cars and drives a large one. You really love cars, don't you? I've never met anyone who loves cars as much as you do. Do you think so? My car is always clean, right? I think it's necessary to keep it clean, especially when I'm driving you. Riding in a clean car, as he says, is indeed a pleasant experience. I love these moments with him. I never doubted that things would continue this way forever. It was about a month after getting married that I began to feel our days together might be shattered.
Mom! I'm not a child, stop it. I can eat by myself, I'm fine. But, look, if you hurt your hand, it wouldn't be good. You work with computers, so it's not okay. Even so. Melissa is here too. It's fine. We always eat like this, right? I'll do it for you.
That day, Deborah came to our house with crab. She meticulously peeled the crab meat and handed it to him. I watched this scene from the kitchen, puzzled. He is the same age as me. There's no reason he can't eat crab by himself, and using a computer isn't a critical issue for him since his job is mostly outside sales. In fact, when we ate crab together, he peeled and ate it himself without any problem or injury.
Charles, this one has a lot of meat. Here, open your mouth. It's okay. I can eat by myself. It's fine, it's fine.
She cuddled up next to him, feeding him the crab. Honestly, I thought one didn't need to be that close to eat. From that day on, I started to notice how unusually close they were. And once I felt that, everything began to bother me. I'm going to take Mom to her class today.
What? But we had plans to go to the movies this evening, remember? I even bought the tickets.
I'm sorry. We can see the movie when it comes out on DVD or something. Since we've already bought the tickets, why don't you go see it by yourself today? Maybe it's not exactly being a mama's boy, but for some reason, he always seems to do whatever Deborah says. Not long ago, she suddenly wanted pizza in the evening. We had planned to go out for steak that day. We were all ready to leave when she called. I thought maybe the three of us would go for pizza, but he left me with, "Sorry, go have steak by yourself," and went to pick up Deborah. When I talked to him about it after he returned, he just said he'd be more careful next time. But nothing changed with him. Whenever my plans with Deborah overlapped, he would prioritize her for some reason. And she naturally accepted this. Furthermore, she seemed to try to stay as long as possible near him. Apparently, at his request, Deborah started bringing dinner over more often, and their dinners together became more frequent. It became a routine once or twice a week. No matter how much I protested that it would be too much for Deborah, she insisted. It's fine because we live close. Without showing any sign of stopping. Moreover, on weekends, she would invite us for tea time or meals at the in-laws' house. Naturally, our time as a couple decreased, and I couldn't find time for household chores I wanted to do over the weekend. If I said I wanted him to go alone, her strong wish would lead to me being invited as well. Whether she came to our house or we were called to the in-laws' house, the message was the same. Deborah began to make snide remarks about my inability to do household chores.
Melissa, I understand you're a dual-income couple, but you should at least make dinner properly. Relying on frozen food is a failure as a wife.
I'm sorry, when I come home late, he prefers to buy his favorite frozen food.
What is that? Not only do you not cook properly, but you're making your husband do the grocery shopping for dinner? I can't believe it. Do you know how busy Charles is? As his wife, you should at least consider the family's nutrition and make meals.
She was shocked at my words. Then she crossed her arms and looked up at us, starting to speak in a strong tone.
Basically, I'm the one who makes most of your dinners. I started doing it once a week because I knew you were busy, but then it became 2 or 3 times a week. And on weekends, you eat at our house, so there's hardly any chance for you to make dinner. Everyone's busy, so using that as an excuse just won't do.
I couldn't hide my sigh at her words. Whose fault does she think it is that I even have less time to make dinner? It's Deborah who keeps bringing meals we didn't ask for, insisting on it despite our refusals. When I'm about to retort, Charles steps in front of me and glared at me. "That's right, Melissa. Mom's cooking is delicious, but you can't just rely on that. Having her bring food over puts too much burden on her. And relying on frozen food all the time isn't healthy. From now on, try to make something yourself, even if it's just a little."
Well said, Charles. You need to properly train your wife. After all. But Charles, it's not like I hate cooking, you know?
I know. I love Mom's home cooking the best. And then, they create a world just for the two of them. They don't notice me standing there, not saying anything, watching them with cold eyes.
Melissa is a young girl, so it's understandable. Even if she had the time, I wouldn't expect her to be able to make delicious meals. She probably can only make menus that are too salty and not nutritious.
That's right. She likes steak, so she often makes meat dishes. Plus, she is a bit naive about the world.
Meat isn't everything. You need to think about vegetables and get a balanced intake.
She can't think about nutrition yet. She doesn't have the experience as a wife like Mom does. He joins Deborah in mocking me. What an insult, it's ridiculous to even argue back. I wish they would just leave, but if I stay silent,
she is not very friendly.
Then again, they both make fun of me. If I ignore that too, eventually, Deborah, satisfied, goes back to her house. As soon as she leaves, Charles starts playing games on his mobile phone, and I confront him.
Hey, what do you want? Making her bring over food we didn't ask for, then getting mad at me for not cooking. It's because she always brings so much that I can't cook. And both of you nag about cooking and cleaning, but don't you realize that because she comes over so often, I don't even have time for that? If you want me to do it, then don't invite her over. If you prefer her, why don't you just go back to your parents' house by yourself?
He looks at me and laughs dismissively. What, are you jealous? Our family has always been close, and that's well regarded by our neighbors. Besides, you could learn and improve your skills if you got taught by Mom. Instead of saying cold things like, "Don't invite her over," why don't you get her to teach you?
What?
I'm at a loss for words at his irrelevant response. He doesn't seem to expect a reply from me, as his attention returns to his mobile game. I feel a heavy sense of despair. He is no longer the man I once loved. After a while, I start to argue back against her, ready to be disliked by her. But she keeps coming over. "I'm teaching you." And she keeps coming to us again. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, I refuse to let her into the house and clearly tell her it's a nuisance. She looks dumbfounded but then shouts back in anger. When I push her out and close the door, Charles comes home and joins her in storming into the living room to yell. And that seemed to be the last straw. She starts interfering in my job too.
Melissa, can't you cut back on work a bit? The house isn't tidy on weekdays. You need to keep it cleaner, don't you?
Today is Charles's day to clean up. So please tell him that.
What are you thinking? Making your husband, who works outside, do house chores. I work outside too. Since we both work outside, we both do the chores.
She might understand being a dual-income couple, but she strongly believes housework is the wife's duty. So, she thinks I'm pushing all the chores onto him. She sighed deeply, as if exasperated.
Melissa, there's a difference in income between Charles and you. Isn't it normal for the one with the lesser income, in this case, Melissa, to take on more household chores? If you can't do that, you should consider becoming a housewife. Unfortunately, our incomes are almost the same.
and on his salary alone, becoming a housewife isn't feasible. That's why I have to work too. We both work full-time and come home around the same time. And you still say I should be the only one doing the chores?
It's not about when you come home. You have no respect or appreciation for your husband who earns for you every day.
Without waiting for my response, she exaggeratedly waves her hand and sighs as if she's had enough. I wanted to retort that there's no appreciation or respect coming from him either, but she wasn't even listening to me anymore. Even as my conflict with she escalated to this point, Charles never once listened to my side. Instead, he would join her in blaming me, and he stopped doing any household chores, eventually spending more time at the in-laws' house than at home. If I tried to point this out, he would start berating me furiously. So, I just watched him leave. It was easier for me to let him spend his time at the in-laws' house than to force us to be together. One day, I came home early from work, walking from a nearby company. Just as I entered the apartment complex, I saw Charles and Deborah about to leave in our car parked in the lot. Disliking even the idea of greeting them, I tried to walk away quickly when the car in front of me suddenly accelerated towards me. Unable to outrun the car's speed, I was knocked down. Fortunately, my head wasn't hit, but looking at my aching leg, I noticed it was bleeding. It seemed I had cut my skin on an asphalt protrusion when I fell, causing blood to pour from my thigh. As I was panicking about the blood, I heard the car door open. It was only Charles who got out. He left the passenger door open and started carefully inspecting the spot where I presumably made contact with the car, never once meeting my eyes. Deborah, looking pale, was in the driver's seat and didn't even try to get out of the car.
Hey!
When I finally called out to Charles, who was still checking the front bumper, he stood up. The bleeding was still going on, and as I thought about needing to go to the hospital, Charles, without turning to me, walked towards the driver's seat.
The car's not damaged, so it's all good. Mom, are you hurt? That was scary, huh? Are you okay?
I was dumbfounded. Here I was, bleeding, and all he cared about were the car and Deborah. Deborah said, "I'm okay." To which Charles smiled gently, then tried to get back into the passenger seat. Finally, he looked at me.
Hey, don't sit in the middle of the road. You're blocking the cars, aren't you?
His lack of concern infuriated me.
Don't joke around. You hit me and I'm injured, and that's how you talk? You're the one joking. You suddenly jumped out, so it's your fault you got hit. And then you fell and blame Mom. What were you planning to do if the car got damaged?
I couldn't believe he could be so inhumane. To hit someone, injure them, and then claim the injured party is at fault. Without a single word of concern for me, he continued to gesture for me to move to the side of the road.
Caring about the car when someone's bleeding. You saw me in front of you, right? Yet you drove into me at that speed. It's wrong to accelerate like that in a parking lot. If it were someone else, would you say the same thing you're saying to me?
Huh?
You're not a stranger, you're family. If I hit you, I'm the one paying for the repairs, get it? Hitting you doesn't benefit me a cent, understand? Benefit? You're the one who hit me. Why should I be blamed?
As Charles and I were arguing, Deborah finally got out of the driver's seat. She approached me, standing intimidatingly tall, and looked down on me.
Melissa, do you have any idea how much his car costs? To think you can say such things after running into it yourself. Apologizing first is the common sense thing to do.
I was so astounded I couldn't speak. It was a clear example of being speechless. Despite the car accelerating because she pressed the gas, She seemed to believe I was the one who ran into it.
Why are you still sitting there playing the victim? This happened because you weren't walking on the side. As he said, it's your fault.
That's right.
It's Melissa's fault. Just go home and take care of the house.
That's all you can do right now. I was left speechless by their words. They insisted that I had run into the car at a tremendous speed. Their absurd claim made my head spin. Annoyed with me for not moving, he roughly pushed me to the side of the road. Ignoring my groans of pain, he drove off. Immediately after, someone rushed to my side.
Are you okay? I've called the police. I'll get my car. Let's go to the hospital.
The person who offered help was a colleague living in the same apartment complex. I realized she was off today and thought about borrowing a towel or something because my blood might stain her car, and then I felt dizzy again. It turned out I had lost too much blood. I realized this after receiving treatment in the hospital and explaining the situation to the doctors. I was told I would need to stay in the hospital for a few days. But I hadn't prepared for this. Even if I had to ask someone from home, I wasn't sure if he would be there. Even if he was, I didn't want to rely on him. Fortunately, there was a store inside the hospital, so I asked a nurse to prepare what I needed. After informing my workplace and thanking the colleague who brought me, my phone started vibrating. It was a call from Charles. I had no intention of answering, but because I had just been on the phone with my colleague, I accidentally tapped to answer, and his voice came through.
Finally answered. Do you realize how much trouble you've caused Mom, and yet you ignore calls from your family?
What?
Who are you? My family doesn't include a hit-and-run driver.
I retorted strongly to his words.
What? Don't you start treating Mom like she committed a hit-and-run. The whole neighborhood is buzzing with rumors that she did it. The police might come too. You reported it, didn't you? Just tell the police and Mom it was a misunderstanding. It was a hit-and-run since you drove away after hitting me. And I didn't report it.
He raised his voice in frustration when I told him it was my colleague who took me to the hospital.
Well, just tell the police it was your fault, and it'll all be cleared up. Come on, hurry up.
I have to be hospitalized, so that's impossible.
Besides, you were in the passenger seat, right? Do you really think I ran into the car and fell?
He fell silent for a moment after my retort about playing the victim. But then he spoke to me as if scolding a child.
Look, Melissa. If it turns out Mom made a driving mistake and hit you, what do you think will happen? Mom might become too scared to drive again. Wouldn't that be pitiful?
That doesn't make sense.
Someone who drives that dangerously shouldn't be driving at all. Why would you say that? Just tell the police you weren't looking where you were going, and it'll all be settled. We're supposed to help each other out in times of need.
With a sigh that seemed almost audible over the phone, I took a deep breath.
It seems your idea of family and mine are different. I'll send the divorce papers once I'm discharged. I'll be questioned by the police too, so I'm hanging up now. What? How does a problem between Mom and you lead to a divorce between us?
With that, I hung up the phone. I took several deep breaths to calm my rising edge, and started planning my return to my parents' house while scheduling my next steps. I couldn't get back to my parents' house without flying. Although it was a distant place to rely on, I had no choice but to do so. I had been preparing for a divorce already, so packing my belongings wouldn't be a problem. I handed my house keys to my mom, who came to the hospital, and she agreed to collect my packed belongings during the weekdays. Then the police came for questioning. After the report, the apartment management company was contacted, and it seems the parking lot surveillance camera captured the moment I was hit. Knowing there was evidence, I was relieved to hear this could lead to Shia's arrest. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, Deborah had been arrested by the police. Apparently, when the police went to the in-laws' house to inquire, she attempted to flee by pushing an officer but was quickly apprehended. She was deemed a flight risk and immediately placed into a patrol car. As for me, I didn't return home but went straight to my parents' house with the luggage my mom had packed for me. Though I had to quit my job, I felt relieved to start fresh and look for new employment. The warm send-off I received when I visited my company to say goodbye and apologize might also be a reason for my positive outlook. A few days later, when I initiated a divorce through a lawyer, he categorically refused. Moreover, he showed up at my parents' house. My parents managed to block him at the entrance. Despite his repeated claims of misunderstanding, the evidence was clear, and there was no way Deborah's crime could be undone. My dad, furious at his incessant chants of family, slammed the door shut.
This idiot! Never call our daughter your family again. Just go away!
Despite this, he could still be seen from the window, trying to pry the door open. Suddenly, he turned around to find intimidating-looking locals, known for their imposing presence, staring him down. Seeing them approach, he jumped and ran off, likely trembling at the airport waiting for the next flight by now. Afterward, we were successfully divorced. It turns out not only Deborah, who was driving, but also Charles, who was in the car, were under investigation for hit and run. Unlike Deborah, who fled and was detained, he cooperated with the investigation and was allowed to remain at home, avoiding custody. However, my departure by plane raised concerns of him potentially fleeing, leading to his detainment similar to Deborah's. His willingness to accept my divorce request seemed like an attempt to show remorse. But, as long as the divorce was finalized, I didn't care much for the rest. The colleague who informed me about these events said Charles and Deborah had become the hottest topic among neighbors.
The husband who cares more about his mother who hit his wife. The worst parent and child duo for a hit and run. A parent and child arrested together.
They had become daily gossip. With Charles and Deborah now unreachable, I had no choice but to rely on my lawyer. But since I didn't want to see their faces anyway, it wasn't much of an issue. Going forward, dealing with their insurance company, the police investigation, and whether the prosecution would press charges would take time. I just hoped for a swift resolution so I would never have to contact them again.